I'm about to tell you the story of the single most compelling piece of thermal Bigfoot footage ever captured. This 22-second clip right here. It's just one from among many sightings of the mysterious being folks from Florida call the skunk ape. But I won't stop there. This clip isn't convincing because it's especially long, clear, or close, but because it comes with a mountain of other evidence from the same area. And there are details in it that undeniably point to something that shouldn't be there. Something that most people still say doesn't exist.
My name's Stacy Brown Sr. On May 8, 2012, I think I filmed a skunk ape.
This footage, along with all the other evidence and extremely unsettling events documented in the same spot from the late 1800s until today, well, they hit so hard because the deeper you investigate them, the harder they become to explain away. I say harder, but as you'll soon see, impossible is probably closer to the mark. In 2012, two men, a father and son, entered the forests of northern Florida after hearing wood knocks and strange vocalizations outside their camp. What happened next terrified them so badly that they abandoned the area in a blind panic.
Come on, we gotta go. What?
One of those men, Stacy Brown Sr, later admitted that when the figure they filmed stepped out from behind a tree and looked directly toward him in total darkness, well, he completely lost control and fled.
See something, man, big, walk out. That is stupid ass kid. Phil, man, we gotta get out of here. We gotta go change the battery.
But here's where the story gets even more disturbing. The thermal footage itself is compelling enough. The size, the stride length, the speed of movement, the reaction of the witnesses, even the fact that veteran Sasquatch investigator Cliff Barrickman personally investigated the case and did tons of measuring and analysis. He concluded that the footage is authentic. But like I said, things only got stranger from there. See, I started digging into the history of this exact area, and I discovered something. Just a few miles from where this footage was shot, newspapers in the 1800s reported the capture of a, quote, wild, hair-covered man living in the swamps around Ocheesee Pond. Witnesses described him as covered in a, quote, phenomenal growth of hair and swimming island to island through the marshes before finally being captured. There's good reason to conclude that this wasn't a human, but that wasn't the only report. Reports of monsters around Florida's wetlands have been coming in for decades. Some are hoaxes, but many are not, including the monsters today's sponsor is all about catching. I'm talking about the monsters waiting for you in Fishing Clash, the sponsor of today's video. Fishing Clash is a fast-paced fishing adventure where you track down monster fish from around the world right from your phone. I don't play many video games, but this one is honestly too fun to pass up. You can explore over 50 real-world fishing locations and catch hundreds of species. But the real thrill comes when you hook a boss fish. These things take skill, strategy, and upgraded gear to land. But don't just take it from me. Even Stacy Brown Jr., who we're talking about in this video, got into the game after years as a professional fisherman.
Fishing Clash surprised me. It actually feels like real fishing competition without ever leaving home.
What I like most about Fishing Clash is that it fits into those little gaps in your day, whether you've got 5 minutes to spare or you want to compete in global leaderboards and real-time clan wars. It's incredibly easy to pick up. Just tap, cast, and catch. Over 50 million players have already joined. Scan the QR code on screen or use the link at the top of the description or pinned comment to download Fishing Clash for free. Use my gift code, CABININTHEWOODS, to unlock a free welcome reward, including a custom unique avatar and upgraded gear worth $20. Download the game, grab your bonus, and let me know your biggest trophy catch in the comments. Thanks to Fishing Clash for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to skunk apes. Over the years, this same region has produced terrifying vocalizations, massive footprints, objects thrown from the darkness, creatures seen crossing roads and riverbanks, and multiple independent witnesses describing the exact same thing. And it isn't a bear or a man in a suit. After exhaustively going through all the evidence surrounding this case, I no longer think that Stacy Brown's thermal footage is just interesting. I know it's real, and soon you will too. Section 1. The Night of the Footage.
I know people say they want to see a Sasquatch and stuff like that. Be careful what you wish for, because you'll never get it out of your head.
The footage itself was captured on May the 8th, 2012 in Torreya State Park in northern Florida. And according to the two men who filmed it, Stacy Brown Jr. and Sr., the entire encounter started with strange sounds outside their camp. At the time, Stacy Brown Jr. was already deeply interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon. He'd had some hair-raising encounters before, but his father, Stacy Sr., was far more skeptical. The two would occasionally head into the woods together, partly out of curiosity, partly just as a father-son spending time together in the wilderness sort of deal.
I'd had the night all to myself, and my son had been wanting to use my thermal camera. I told him that I would go when I had a chance. And so tonight was the chance, even though it was raining, it was crappy weather. I had called him, he had just gotten off work. I said, get your crap together, let's go. He kind of complained a little bit about the weather. Oh man, it's raining tonight, night ain't gonna be good. I said, nope, we're going tonight, that's the only night I got, let's go.
According to Stacy Sr., the park was nearly empty. The two men hiked into the campground area, set up camp, started a fire, and started making supper. Before long, they started hearing strange knocking sounds echoing through the forest. At first, Stacy Sr. dismissed it completely, but then the sounds escalated.
We hiked down to the Rock Creek campground in Torreya. Nobody was in the park. We're playing music. We're cooking some ribs. We're just hanging out, having a good time, and we hear a knock. And so I tell my dad, yo, they're here. And he's like, it's just the wind blowing the trees together. I'm like, all right, fair enough. We go back to it, hear another knock, hear another knock. And he's like, if we hear another one, we'll go out, okay? As soon as that last word left his lips, it was like a grunt and a knock, like he was putting everything into it.
We started a fire, we was cooking supper, we was listening to music, and he says, and then in an hour or so, something came up and started walking around the tent. So we did everything exactly like he said, and we put something on to eat, and sure enough, it wasn't too long. We started hearing this, well, I think the first thing we heard was a knock. And he said, see there, that's what it is. And I said, well, you know, what's a knock? And he explained that to me. And then in a few minutes later, I thought I heard something that sounded like a grumble. All right, man. This battery just keeps dying on me. I have to cut it off when we're going. All right, we're hearing the knocks and a growl right over here. So we're gonna cut the radio up. We got a fire going, and we're gonna slip out around this way and go most of the time lights out, just enough so we can see beneath our feet a little bit. And I got this thermal. When I can keep it on, I can see the trail good, but the battery's going on and off. And we'll see if we can't spook something up and go. So go cut
The wet conditions made thermal viewing difficult. So Stacy Sr. switched the unit into black hot mode. That means heat is dark colored and non-heat is light colored, the opposite of the normal thermal camera setup. And they moved deeper into the woods. The next part of Stacy Sr.'s account is important because you can actually hear the moment his skepticism begins collapsing.
started trying to walk toward it, and the way this worked is he was hanging onto my shoulder, had a little handy cam that had the night vision and I had the thermal, and I had to turn it to black heat because that's the only thing we could see the ground with. Everything was kind of wet and hot and steamy, and you had it on white hot. You couldn't really, everything blurred together. And we were worried about snakes. Snakes were everywhere in this place. And so we'd walk toward the sound, then I'd stop, we'd listen for it again, and we'd walk toward it again.
As they moved farther from camp, both men, father and son, began hearing these heavy footfalls moving through the woods around them. Not just in one direction either, on both sides. According to both father and son, it started feeling less like they were tracking something and more like something was tracking them. Then, after roughly 20 minutes of slowly advancing through the darkness, Stacy Sr. spotted what he initially assumed was a raccoon clinging to a tree ahead of them.
I seen something on a tree that looked like a little head. And I took it for a coon because it was raising up and down on the tree like this. And then I got to looking again, and there was one on this side of the tree, kind of down from it. So you had the tree right here, and you had this black hot spot and this black hot spot. And I said, oh, well, this is what it is. This is a coon. That's all it is.
Then everything changed.
And so I went to step to get a picture because the coon was going around that side of the tree. And when I did, I put my foot out and to take a step, and I kicked a palmetto bush. And that palmetto bush went pop real loud. And when I did that, that's when this thing left from behind the tree and just took off. And I wasn't expecting that. When I seen that, I just wasn't expecting that at all.
And this is the exact moment the panic set in.
I went out there thinking that, well, okay, they had been out here drunk or something, and they're hearing turtles and all kinds of stuff running around on the ground. And this fear just came over me because I just noticed. That's when it realized to me that whatever that was wasn't a coon. It had its head stuck out and it was looking at me. It could see me in the pitch black. And I mean, it was pitch black. You couldn't see this far in front of your face. And that fear just came over me so hard that all I could think was, that's the way we came from. It went that way. It's going to cut us off, and it's going to catch us.
Section 2. We're blind. According to both Stacy Sr. and Stacy Jr., the figure crossed an enormous distance almost instantly. In later interviews, both men estimated the subject covering roughly a 9-foot gap in little more than a single stride as it moved from left to right behind the trees. They were later proven right in this estimate. But then something happened that made the situation even worse. The thermal unit they were using suddenly shut off, effectively blinding them. Immediately, panic completely took over.
I went into panic mode. I stopped. I said, we've got to go. We got to get out of here. And he was like, well, what's the matter? What's going on? What's going on? Did you see something? Because he can't see squat. He doesn't know what's going on. And I'm turning around and I'm leaving.
Get out here, man. Come on, we gotta go. Get out here.
What makes this part of the story especially compelling is that Stacy Jr. couldn't actually see what his father had seen at this point. He was just following behind him in near total darkness with the night shot camera, while Stacy Sr. operated the thermal. By the way, guys, Stacy Brown Jr. has his own channel here on YouTube called Bigfoot Stacy, where he hosts a show called The Bigfoot Underground. And honestly, if you're interested in this subject, I highly recommend it. Stacy's not just some random guy who stumbles into one strange encounter. Like me, his encounters changed him, and he spent years investigating this phenomenon more deeply than just about anyone else I know. The man has an almost encyclopedic knowledge of Bigfoot cases and the people behind them, and like me, he's also a professional filmmaker, so the production quality of his show is really excellent. He posts multiple Bigfoot-themed shows every week. So if you enjoy my content here on Cabin in the Woods, there's a very good chance you'll love the Bigfoot Underground too. Check it out. I'll put a link in the description, or you can use the on-screen QR code. So while Stacy Sr. is suddenly panicking and trying to retreat through the woods, Stacy Jr. is basically blind and confused, trying to understand what just happened.
trying to find the trail. Obviously, we came off the trail because at this point, I had the phone or some kind of a little bit of a light where I could see a little bit, and I couldn't see the trail, and I cut it back off because I didn't want whatever this was to find us. And he said, the trail's over here. Come on, the trail's over here, over here. What the hell's going on? I said, well, the batteries are dead. We got to go. We got to go. The batteries see that.
I seen something, man, big, walk out. And this stupid ass kid. Phil, man, we got to get at it. We got to go change the batteries. Come on.
The trail's here, man. The trail's this way. Go this way. Go this way. Go. You seen something walk out?
Something walk out from behind the tree.
Did you record it?
Yeah, I hit record. But it's out here, man. If it's seen me in the dark, we can't see nothing. We're blind, man. We got to change these batteries.
That line has always stood out to me. We're blind, because it perfectly captures the reality of the situation they knew they were in. Whatever this thing was, Stacy Sr. believed it could clearly see them in total darkness, while they themselves were almost helpless once the thermal failed. But according to both men, the fear didn't end there. They believed that the creature or creatures were paralleling them through the woods as they retreated toward their camp. Stacy Sr. later admitted something important about the battery issue, too. At the time, he told his son that the thermal unit had died and they had no replacement batteries. But later, he confessed that that wasn't true.
There wasn't no batteries. There's no batteries in the truck. There's no batteries nowhere. I lied to him. I said there was no batteries. I just wanted to get the stuff and get the hell out of there. That's how scared I was of this thing, whatever it was.
That's another detail that makes this story difficult to dismiss, in my opinion, because it doesn't sound heroic. It doesn't sound like somebody trying to present himself as fearless in the face of some unknown being. It sounds genuinely like somebody who got overwhelmed by fear. The Browns rushed back to camp, tore everything down as quickly as possible, and headed for the truck. Only then did they finally review the footage that they'd captured in the woods. And according to Stacy Jr., the moment they watched it, the entire situation suddenly became very real. Section 3. The footage. When the Browns finally made it back to the truck and reviewed the thermal footage they'd just captured, the emotional reactions between father and son were very different. By this point, Stacy Jr. had already seen these beings multiple times. He fully accepted that they exist. But Stacy Sr. still didn't want them to. Even after seeing the footage, his first instinct was still to try to rationalize it.
And he played the video back and he got real upset. And so he cut his tape on. He says, so what the hell just happened? And I said, dude, I freaked. I panicked. I said, when that thing come out from behind the tree, it scared the hell out of me. And I said, I'm not going back down there. I'm not going back down there. You and your buddies come back down here. I'll let you have the camera. You can take the thermal camera in the woods, because I wouldn't let him take it because it cost so much. But at that point, I just wanted to drive off and leave.
Even afterward, Stacy Sr. reportedly accused his son of somehow placing one of his friends in the woods as a prank.
Because like 2 weeks after we got the footage, my dad was in denial. He was like, all right, cut the crap. Who did you have out there? And I'm like, Dad, I got friends, but I ain't got friends that are going to run around the woods naked in those woods on a Tuesday night with no flashlight. You can't do it. That's another thing people don't, when you just see the thermal, you don't realize how thick that set of woods is. You cannot run in the complete darkness. You will hit something.
Stacy Sr.'s reaction is important psychologically because it shows that even after seeing the footage for himself, not to mention getting a sense of the being in real life as it was happening, well, his mind was still searching desperately for a normal explanation. One that didn't involve a huge, hairy, man-like being running through impossibly thick Florida woods in the dead of night. But the deeper investigators looked into this footage, the harder that denial became. One of the first people Stacy Sr. reached out to was veteran Bigfoot investigator Cliff Barrickman. Now, whether you personally agree with Cliff on everything or not, One thing almost everyone acknowledges is that he's not naive about hoaxes. He spent years investigating alleged Bigfoot evidence, and like most serious researchers in this field, he's seen plenty of misidentifications, exaggerations, and even outright fakes. Yet, after investigating the Brown footage personally, Cliff concluded that the footage appeared authentic. And honestly, when you slow this clip down and really examine what's happening, it's not hard to understand why. First, the being itself and its movement. The figure doesn't move like someone trying to perform for a camera. It doesn't posture, it doesn't hesitate, it reacts instantly and naturally, like an intelligent being suddenly realizing it's been detected. It emerges from behind one tree and then swiftly strides behind another. Second, the stride length. According to the Browns, the gap between those two trees was over 9 feet. This detail was later confirmed by Cliff Barrickman. The subject crossed that gap in roughly 1 1/4 strides. What that means is that this stride the creature takes was over 6 feet long. To put that in context, the average stride length of a 6-foot-tall human is around 2 feet 5 inches. Only about a third of the proven stride length of the being in the Browns footage. Third, the setting. This wasn't filmed beside a road. It wasn't filmed near a crowd. These men were deep in an isolated, rain-soaked forest in near total darkness, navigating steep terrain with limited visibility while hearing movement around them from multiple directions. And finally, the reaction of the witnesses themselves. This is one of the biggest reasons I find this footage compelling. Their fear feels real. Especially from Stacy Sr.
Let's get out of here, man. Come on, we gotta go. Get out of here. What?
Nothing about his reaction sounds like somebody trying to become famous. If anything, it sounds like someone deeply uncomfortable with what has just happened.
I said, dude, I freaked.
That's not the language of somebody trying to sound brave. But there's another detail here that rarely gets discussed. The Browns didn't immediately rush out trying to monetize this footage or turn it into some giant internet spectacle. Instead, Stacy Sr. quietly reached out to outside investigators first because he wanted other people who knew what they were talking about to look at it critically. According to the Browns, the footage was initially sent to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Derek Randalls, Cliff Barrickman, as you know, and the Find Bigfoot community online. Eventually, Cliff Barrickman was the one who agreed to investigate the case personally. And when the footage was finally shown publicly, it wasn't debuted on some late-night paranormal reality show. It actually premiered at the FLIR International Conference in Orlando, Florida. That detail alone is fascinating. Even people unconnected with the footage seemed to understand that the Browns had captured something unusual enough that it deserved serious scrutiny. Section 4. Cliff Barrickman investigates. Like I said, once the footage began circulating among researchers, one person who took a serious interest in the case was veteran Bigfoot investigator Cliff Barrickman. He was particularly interested in this case since just months earlier he'd captured some whoops in nearly the exact same spot. What's important here is that Cliff didn't just casually watch the clip online and throw out an opinion from behind a keyboard. He personally traveled to the location with the Browns, interviewed both of them in detail, and walked the terrain himself. He also took measurements from the site and attempted to reconstruct exactly what happened that night with a very high level of detail. That's crucial because one of the easiest things people do with footage like this is try to analyze it in complete isolation from the environment it was filmed in. They ignore the terrain, the lighting, the conditions, and the distances involved, and the physical difficulty of moving through those woods in total darkness in this case. Cliff, on the other hand, approached it very differently. One of the first things he focused on was the movement and proportions of the figure itself relative to the surrounding trees and terrain. According to his analysis, the figure's body shape, posture, and gait were all consistent with other alleged Sasquatch footage he'd studied previously. He specifically noted the unusually long arms, the forward projected head, which looks briefly like it has a sagittal crest on it as the creature moves through this gap, the extremely high shoulder line, and the stride mechanics. One detail he found especially interesting involved the gait. Cliff noted that the trailing leg in the figure's step reached an angle of roughly 89 degrees during the swing phase, far beyond what's normal in typical human walking mechanics, but very similar to what we have observed in analyses of the Patterson-Gimlin film, for example. He also spent considerable time trying to estimate the figure's size, using verified measurements taken directly from the location, including the spacing between the trees that the figure moves behind and the distances involved. Cliff attempted multiple height calculations. Some estimates came out smaller than others, depending on the method he used, but his overall conclusion remained essentially the same. Whatever appears in this footage is extremely large. At various points in his analysis, Cliff estimated the figure could stand somewhere around 8 feet tall, possibly even larger, depending on which calculations were used. He also estimated a shoulder width approaching roughly 4 feet, based on how far the shoulders of the subject are sticking out on either side of this nearly 30-inch diameter tree. Even his more conservative calculations still suggested a figure way bigger than an ordinary human. One particular comparison is especially revealing. During a recreation attempt, James Bobo Fay, who stands 6'4", walked the same path through the woods as the filmed figure, while being filmed by the same camera from the same spot where the Browns had been standing. Even accounting for posture differences and uncertainty in zoom level, the filmed subject still appeared significantly larger than Bobo in the comparative frames. But let's talk about the terrain itself. People watching the clip online often underestimate how difficult those woods actually are to move through the night in. The Browns repeatedly emphasized how thick the vegetation was and how dark the forest became once they left camp.
That's another thing people don't, when you just see the thermal, you don't realize how thick that set of woods is. You cannot run in the complete darkness. You will hit something.
It's an intriguing detail because the figure in the thermal footage doesn't stumble, hesitate, or crash through the brush. It moves fluidly and efficiently across uneven, wet terrain in near total darkness. And Cliff eventually addressed another major accusation directly: CGI manipulation. Over the years, skeptics repeatedly claimed the figure had been digitally added into the footage afterwards. But according to Cliff, after examining the original material and investigating the circumstances surrounding the filming, he found no evidence that the footage had been digitally manipulated or computer-generated. In fact, a lot of the skepticism surrounding the clip eventually shifted away from its CGI toward arguments that it was simply a person in the woods. But as we've discussed, that explanation simply doesn't hold water once you factor in the apparent size of the figure, the massive stride length, the darkness, the thickness of the forest, the witness reactions, and the logistics of coordinating a hoax like this in a nearly empty state park on a rainy Tuesday night. But honestly, one of the strongest aspects of this entire case still isn't the figure itself. It's Stacy Brown Sr. Because the deeper you listen to his interviews, the less he sounds like somebody trying to tell a polished monster story, and the more he sounds like somebody genuinely shaken by what happened. As I've said, according to the Browns, Cliff Barrickman ultimately concluded that the footage appeared authentic. Not proven in the scientific sense. Cliff himself has always been careful with his wording with that sort of thing, but authentic in the sense that he didn't believe the Browns fabricated the encounter. You can read between the lines on that. But the evidence for Sasquatch in this area of Florida didn't stop after May the 8th, 2012. And it didn't start then either. Section 5. The reports didn't stop. At this point, what started standing out to me wasn't just the Brown thermal footage itself. It was how many people from the same general region kept describing remarkably similar experiences. Different people, different backgrounds, different locations, yet the same kinds of sounds, movements, and reactions kept appearing over and over again. One of them was David Lauer. 4 years after the Browns had their experience, within a few miles of where it happened, David caught something big and upright on his thermal camera.
And I'm down here and I'm getting my leaves in a pile, and I hear movement behind me. As I hear movement, I grab my FLIR, I turn it on, and I start recording. I stood up, I turned around, and I started panning. What I heard was some movement up on the top of the ridge and what sounded like a buck grunt. As I was panning from my right to my left, and I captured on FLIR what I believe to be a Sasquatch looking right at me.
Now, this could really only be 3 things: a black bear, a person, or what the locals call a skunk ape, aka Sasquatch. Black bears do rear up on their hind legs occasionally, but they don't walk that way for any meaningful distance. A human wouldn't show up this brightly on thermal, unless they happen to be naked in the forest for some reason. That leaves us with one possibility. But David and the Browns weren't the only ones. Another guy that Stacy Jr. spoke with was Nelson Singletary, who described an experience, again, in Torreya State Park during the winter of 2013. Again, nearly in the exact location the Browns got their footage. According to Nelson, his group had stopped in a ravine area and started doing wood knocks and vocalizations into the forest. Obviously, at this point, this area was well known for Sasquatch activity, and some people wanted to investigate that.
At one point, I'm prompted to do a call, and I made a call that I had been working on, just kind of practicing at home. Didn't think anything was really gonna sound off the way that it did, and then within, I want to say 2-3 seconds, we heard a call back.
What affected him most was the sound itself.
You could tell what it was making the sound wasn't human. It wasn't canine. It was just this long, sustained howl that rose and fell. And I remember my immediate thought was of disbelief in the moment when we heard it. It was like, what the hell was that?
Nelson also described coyotes throughout the area immediately erupting afterward. Another witness from the region, Josh Watson, described a nighttime encounter involving an extremely deep growl near a vehicle.
As I was taking pictures to send to the rest of the group, we heard a large growl, very healthy, bassy, deep growl. It came from right over here, literally within 10 yards of where we are. It had to be either in front of this tree or directly behind the tree.
Hearing this description reminds me so much of my own encounter on Vancouver Island. The deep, bassy growl he mentions. I know what it's like to hear that in the thick woods at night. It changes you. According to Josh, they immediately began scanning the area with thermal equipment because they believed whatever made the sound was still nearby. Then there's Chris Godwin's account. which stands out because Chris comes across far more analytical than sensational in his interview. Chris described being out at a filming location in Gadsden County with a small production crew when strange things started happening around them.
As we're all talking, we hear this limb fall, basically kind of behind the camera guys. And, you know, I dismissed it to a owl maybe flying off where we had stopped. We disturbed it.
But then a second object came in.
And while we're sitting there, another limb comes flying in, but I could hear it go across my head, like, you know, the thing, and it nails this tree and it falls next to the camera guy. And I see it land next to his foot. And it was a log that had been cut on both ends from where they had pushed logs to the edge of this field. So at that moment, we realized, like, someone threw this thing at us.
That same feeling keeps surfacing throughout these modern reports from the Torreya and Apalachicola regions. Witnesses repeatedly describe the sense that something is aware of them long before they become aware of it. That exact feeling appears in the Brown encounter, too. According to Stacy Sr., the moment that terrified him most wasn't simply seeing movement behind the tree. It was realizing the figure had already been watching him in total darkness the entire time.
Just noticed, that's when it realized to me that whatever that was wasn't a coon. It had its head stuck out and it was looking at me. It could see me in the pitch black. And I mean, it was pitch black. You couldn't see this far in front of your face.
Section 6. A strange history in the same area. At this point, even if someone remains skeptical of the thermal footage itself, along with the myriad of modern reports from others in the area, there's another part of this story that becomes very difficult to ignore. The history of the region. Once I sank my teeth into researching the area surrounding Torreya State Park and the Apalachicola River Basin, I realized the Brown's encounter wasn't some isolated modern story. Strange reports connected to this exact part of northern Florida go back well over a century. According to local historian Dale Cox, there are records of a giant skeleton being found in the area and then disappearing. But one of the strangest stories involves something known as the Ocheesee Pond Wild Man.
As I began to interview people about this case, I talked to a number of people who said that their grandfather or their great uncle or their great aunt remembered the case of this Ocheesee Pond Wild Man. They talked about going up to a corn crib and looking between the logs and seeing this hair-covered creature running back and forth and screaming and growling. And one in particular told me that his uncle was captured by this wild man.
In 1884, newspapers began reporting that a strange wild man had been captured in the swamps around Ocheesee Pond near Chattahoochee, Florida, only a relatively short distance from where the Browns would eventually capture their thermal footage more than a century later. According to these reports, locals had been encountering a mysterious figure living deep in the swamp for some time before he was finally captured. The descriptions are fascinating. The New York Times reportedly described the figure as being covered in a, quote, phenomenal growth of hair, and said that he had been observed swimming island to island through the marshes around Ocheesee Pond, before eventually being taken into custody. Now, just think about that for a minute. This wasn't modern internet folklore. This was 1880s newspaper reporting from a time when nobody was talking about Bigfoot culture, viral hoaxes, or cryptid TV shows. And according to the reports, the man couldn't properly explain who he was or where he came from. Authorities initially suspected he may have escaped from a mental institution. But according to the papers, officials at the Florida asylum reportedly stated he didn't belong to them. One account described him this way, quote, entirely destitute of clothing, emaciated and covered with a phenomenal growth of hair. Whether this individual was truly some kind of unknown wild man, or a mentally ill hermit surviving in the swamp, or maybe even something stranger. The important point is this. People in this exact region were reporting large, mysterious, human-like beings covered in hair in the wilderness long before modern Bigfoot culture ever existed. And the Ochese Pond story wasn't the only one either. Over the decades, the same general area surrounding the Apalachicola Basin and Torreya region continued producing reports of massive footprints, strange screams, bipedal creatures crossing roads, objects thrown from the woods, growls surrounding camps, and witnesses describing large, upright figures watching them from the darkness. And honestly, that cumulative consistency is, in my opinion, one of the strongest aspects of this entire case. Individually, most single reports can be dismissed. But it seems to me that when the same behaviors, the same sounds, the same descriptions, and the same fear reactions continue repeating across generations in the same isolated region, well, the pattern starts getting a lot harder to ignore. And one more thing. I know Stacy Brown Jr. I'm good friends with him, and I can see in his eyes, the man is telling the truth. When people first watch the Brown thermal footage, they usually focus on the video itself. The shape, the stride, the movement through the trees. But honestly, after digging through all the witness testimony connected to this area, the history of the area, the vocalizations, the tracks, and the encounters from completely independent people, the footage stops feeling isolated. It starts feeling like one brief glimpse into something that's been reported in those woods for a very long time. And whether people are comfortable admitting it or not, something is clearly happening out there. Guys, thanks so much for watching the whole video. I really hope you enjoyed it and found it as compelling and maybe unsettling as I did. This is legitimate Sasquatch evidence, and it's really difficult to logically get around that fact, no matter how skeptical you are. Like I said earlier, if you want solid, down-to-earth Sasquatch content that has as high a chance as any of being absolutely legitimate and ironclad and no nonsense, I highly recommend checking out Stacy Brown Jr.'s channel. Just check out Bigfoot Stacy on YouTube. His show is called The Bigfoot Underground. If you like my stuff, as I said earlier, you'll definitely like what he's doing on his show. So check out his channel and subscribe to it. You won't be disappointed. If you enjoyed this content, please give the video a like, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to Cabin in the Woods. Those things help keep me going here. And if you want to show me extra support, I'll leave a link to my Patreon page in the description below. Thanks again to Fishing Clash for sponsoring today's video. And remember, you can support my work and the channel by downloading Fishing Clash using the link in the pinned comment or the description below. I really appreciate you guys being here, watching and commenting and encouraging me in this research. And I look forward to seeing all of you in the next video.